The Rochester Symphony presents Journey Through Space, featuring the Rochester Symphony Orchestra and Chorale at Rochester Lord's High School. Conducted by Maestro Jerry Lance.
Well, when composers nearly 200 years ago started to write music that described things, not music that just stood alone like a symphony or concerto, but was about something, they picked all sorts of topics. They picked people, they picked emotions, they picked mountains or rivers, they even picked railroad trains in some when they got invented, but no one ventured into space. Not until about a century ago, when Gustav Holst, the enterprising Englishman and mystic and eccentric, decided that space was a good thing to explore. Now, Gustav Holst does not sound like a British composer. In fact, a few generations before, they had come from Sweden, and they had the tradition of naming the eldest son a very Swedish name. So it was Gustav Theodor von Holst, to be complete. And he was a strange bird. He wanted to be a concert violinist, but neuritis in his right arm prevented that. He switched to the trombone and to composing, but he was always a bit sickly. The only job he could hold on to was a teaching job in a girls' school, St. Paul's School, on the outskirts of London, now very much within London. But the only time he had to compose was in August. When all his colleagues were going to the seaside or to the Alps to go climbing, he locked himself in his room and wrote. And just about 100 years ago, from 1914 to 1916 and finally completed in 1917, a century ago, he created 7 pieces called The Planets. Why 7? Well, Earth didn't count because we were here. He didn't need to describe that. And Pluto, whether it's a planet or not, had not yet been discovered. So he was left with 7 planets, which he described in a way that kind of lies between the mythological, the Greek and Roman gods, though he wasn't leaning in that way, and the astrological, which is the mystery of what these planets mean in their alignment. And he was very much into astrology. As I said, an unusual guy, but he gave us an unforgettable gift a century ago, the planets. Holst starts off not at Mercury, at the innermost planet, or at Neptune, which for him was the outermost planet, but in the middle with Mars, the bringer of war, he calls it. And many people thought he did this because he completed it in the early years of World War I. But in fact, he had sketched the whole thing out for piano before the war began, before there was even a suggestion that there would be a war. And so it was very much a thing on his mind. He led off with that, perhaps, when he put the suite together because of the war that was existing. But we're not sure. Why is it Mars such a war god? That was the Roman association with Mars. And he starts it out with the strings playing with the back of their bows, the wood pounding on almost like drums, a rhythm that's in 5. This is the first significant piece of music written in a 5 meter rather than 2, 3, 4, or 6, which are all quite common. But yata-ta-tum, tum, ta-ta-tum is a 5 pattern, and it pervades the entire piece relentlessly for war. Our next piece is Venus. Venus, if Mars brought war, Venus brings peace. Peace, sweet and soft and gentle, with a horn solo followed by flutes. It's lovely, dominated by the winds rather than the strings or the brass, and it's a lovely, lovely piece of gentleness. Then it's Mercury. Mercury, the winged messenger. And again, that's mythological and it has speed. It's the fastest piece in the planets and it goes mercurially from one instrument to another. He tosses it back and forth between strings and winds and brass, or even between individual instruments, each playing a half of measure at a very rapid pace. It's hard to keep track of everything that's going on, and that's because Mercury is so fast. And have you ever tried to pick up the metal Mercury? You can't grab a hold of it. You can't grab a hold of this piece either, and that's the way we go out tonight with the elusive Mercury.
us next week for the continuation of Gustav Holst's The Planets. This activity is made possible by the voters of Minnesota through a grant from the Minnesota State Arts Board, thanks to a legislative appropriation from the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. The Rochester Symphony Orchestra Presents is a co-production of KSMQ Public Television, the Rochester Symphony Orchestra and Chorale, and Rochester Symphonic Vision Productions.